David Milch's Deadwood, which premiered on HBO in 2004, earned critical praise, launched careers, and won a devoted fan following over its threes. While admirers of the dark Western crime drama have long lamented its too short run on television, HBO has confirmed that the long-teased feature film follow-up has officially gotten a green light from the network. Milch, who has long wanted to tie up the show's loose ends with a feature, submitted a script to HBO to do just that, and those who have read it have clearly been impressed. W. L. Brown, who played Dan Doherty on the series, tweeted in true Deadwood fashion that, "The hour and a half it took me to read was F-king thrilling and F-king heartbreaking. I was sitting on an airplane, cheering and crying as I took a journey that only David Milch could create. I've read the Deadwood film script. It's stunning. While details of when the film will debut have yet to be announced, there's still reason to celebrate this stellar series with these behind-the-scenes details that will deepen your appreciation of all things Seth Bullock and Al Swearingen. 1. Deadwood was shot on a famous ranch. Much of the series was shot on the sets of Melody Ranch in Santa Clarita Valley, California. Established in 1915, this location has been the backdrop to a long legacy of westerns. Television shows like Gunsmoke, The Cisco Kid, The Gene Autry Show, The Lone Ranger, and Have Guns will travel lensed there, as did movies like High Noon, The Gunfighter, and Django Unchained. 2. It was based on the real Deadwood, South Dakota. In the 1870s, Deadwood, South Dakota was a place of criminals and entrepreneurs. Series creator David Milch rigorously researched the real Deadwood by reading its newspapers, the diaries of its residents, and formal historical accounts like Black Hills expert Watson Parker's Deadwood, The Golden Years. 3. It is filled with real characters. Wild Bill Hickok and Calamity Jane might have been Deadwood's most famous residents, but Al Swearingen, Seth Bullock, Solstar, E.B. Farnham, A.W. Merrick, Charlie Utter, and George Hurst were all real people with noted moments in history, too. However, characters like Trixie, Whitney Ellsworth, and Alma Garrett were largely fictional, based more on archetypes of people who would they had a place in Deadwood. 4. The real Seth Bullock was called a bad man with a gun. As in the show, Seth Bullock came to Deadwood with his friend Solstar to open a hardware store. He invested in the community, headed healthcare boards, and became the town's first sheriff. That last vocation earned him the aforementioned reputation, which endeared him to Theodore Roosevelt, whom Bullock later successfully helped campaign for the presidency of the United States. The Chicago Tribune later ran a delightful description of Bullock. Bullock attracted general attention around the White House today. He has a fierce-looking melodrama villain's mustache and wears a sombrero. 5. The real Swearingen was no romantic anti-hero. In Deadwood, Swearingen is a pimp, crook, and murderer, but he is also the protector of the crippled Jewel and grimly civic-minded. The real Swearingen was much less admirable. He was a trafficker, tricking women into coming to Deadwood to work in his various business ventures, like a theater, but then forcing them into prostitution. His wife publicly accused him of domestic abuse. Eventually, he was run out of Deadwood and of a massive head wound that was either caused by a fall from a failed leap onto a freight train or a willful act of murder. 6. David Milch didn't want Ian McShane to audition for Swearingen. Milch was convinced Ian McShane would be miscast as Swearingen. In Deadwood, Stories of the Black Hills, he recalls, physically, Ian was absolutely wrong for the part. I didn't even want to read him. I had imagined Swearingen as a physically imposing specimen. But when Ian came in, he neutralized all of that, because he had Swearingen's essence, which was fierce matter-of-factness. He was who he was, unadulterated. 7. The real George Hurst was a working-class hero. George Hurst was a self-made man who had a real gift for mining gold. The series painted him as a robber baron whose gold lust Deadwood's existence. But there was much more to Hurst. He was raised on his parents' farm in Franklin County, Missouri, but left their homestead to join the gold rush in 1850. He made his first million in the Comstock Lode in Nevada, and after his dealings in Deadwood, he went on to become a senator. Described as a plain old Missourian, of small education and no polish of manners by Cosmopolitan in 1888, Hearst purchased the San Francisco Daily Examiner in 1880, and a new family business was born 7 years later when he handed the reins to his only son, William Randolph Hearst. 8. Calamity Jane really did care for the sick. In 1, smallpox hits Deadwood and Doc and Jane see to the afflicted. This generous action has been historically documented, along with Jane's trademark rough-and-tumble appearance. In Estelle Bennett's Old Deadwood Days, she paints a picture of Calamity Jane aka Martha Canary. She was a plain woman, looking older than she really was. She wore a dark cloth coat that never had been good, a cheap little hat, a faded frayed skirt, and Arctic overshoes. She came unscathed through the long smallpox siege and most of her patients lived. Dr. Babcock believed that without her care not one of them would have pulled through. 9. Calamity Jane and Wild Bill weren't really that close. It's suspected that their connection has been conflated over the years as a part of the blossoming tall tales of the Old West. The pair did come to Deadwood together, but hadn't known each other long before that. However, in her memoirs Jane did describe him as a friend. And the two, who nearly 30 years apart, were buried beside each other in Deadwood's Mount Moriah Cemetery. 10. General Samuel Fields was a Deadwood celebrity. As he did on the series, Fields proudly called himself the N****** General. He was a notable presence in the camp not only for his claims of being a Union Army general, but also for his flamboyant personality. This made him a recurring figure in the local newspapers like the Black Hills Pioneer, where he was described as irrepressible, duplicatory, candescent, the sly coon Senegambian, and the Shakespearean darky. He was also an outspoken activist for the African American community of Deadwood. 11. St. Paul inspired Reverend Smith's epilepsy plotline. It was the tragic end of Deadwood preacher Reverend Henry Weston Smith that earned the notice of Milch. Though he was fond of saying the Bible was his protection, Smith was murdered making his way from Deadwood to a neighboring town to preach. The sermon found with his remains was "Upon whose life we shall base ours, upon whom better than the great sinner Paul." As Milch had suspected, St. Paul might have been a sufferer of temporal lobe epilepsy. He decided to blend this element into Smith's Deadwood counterpart, leading to a different demise in this case, mercy killing at the hands of Swearingen. 12. If the series hadn't been cancelled, the gem would have burned. Assuming Milch continued to follow the path the real Swearingen blazed, then his beloved saloon would be burned down, likely by one of the whoremonger's many enemies. But you can't keep Hull down. In real life, Swearingen rebuilt it bigger and better than before, and it stood for another 20 years, until someone burned it down again. 13. The origin of Trixie's name came from an old crime report. In the first episode, we meet Trixie after she shoots at John in self-defense. This is a nod to the inspiration for her name. In John S. McClintock's memoir, Pioneer Days of the Black Hills, he recounts, "I beheld a man lying on the floor with a bullet hole clear through his head, back of his eyes. The woman Trixie grabbed a pistol while he was beating her and turned the tables on him." In another Deadwood nod to true life, Doc Cochran responds to the corpse just as the doctor who arrived on the scene did. He ran a probe through his head to inspect the damage to the brain. 14. Paula Malcolmson may have saved Trixie's life. Over TH's Trixie the whore became an indelible part of Deadwood and the makeup of its titular town. But early on, the actress who played her feared her stint on the series would be short-lived. According to Malcolmson, this all changed with Reconnoitering the Rim, in which Trixie shaves the calluses off of Al's feet with a straight razor. The scene was originally set with the two in bed, but Malcolmson suggested the foot-shaving business, something her father used to do for her grandfather, would give the pair's relationship a greater sense of depth and intimacy. She improvised the line, "Shall I do the other foot?" and McShane replied, "Please." She recalls, "The minute he said, 'please,' I knew it was a new place for us." And Trixie was preserved. 15. Sol and Trixie would never have married. Though Solstar became a celebrated and respected leader in the Deadwood community, first as a businessman then as its mayor, he never did get married, even after traveling east in search of a bride. All the same, it seems he was too well-liked to ever be lonely. In 1901's The Great Northwest and its Men of Progress, he was described thusly: "Some men have a genius for popularity. With no effort on their part they become a sort of social or political center from which there seems to radiate an aroma of good fellowship, permeating the entire community. Frank and generous, genial in disposition, ever ready with a helping hand for a fellow in distress, jovial and social, yet, in serious matters, keen and penetrating, sound in judgment of resources in emergency, energy unbounded, and a public spirit ready for war in the interests of his town, country, or state. These are some of the characteristics of the naturally popular man." 16. Milch was determined to get Garrett Dillahundt on Deadwood. Maybe you noticed Dillahundt played both Wild Bill's crop-eared killer James McCall as well as the kinky and sadistic geologist Francis Walcott. But his road to Deadwood was paved with false starts. Dillahundt initially auditioned for the role of Seth Bullock, then Doc Cochran, before being cast as McCall. After the rogue fled Deadwood for good in 1, Milch decided to bring Dillahundt back in 2. First Milch considered him for the role of Hearst, but ultimately chose him to play Walcott, minus the prosthetics that marred his appearance in 1:17. Before Deadwood, Milch pitched a series about NEROS Rome. Unbeknownst to Milch, HBO had already greenlit Rome. Milch believed his fascination with how society can form from chaos could be explored in another historical setting, so he set his sights on the Black Hills of the Old West. 18. The unifier of Deadwood and America is gold. How do you transform chaos into society? According to Milch, mankind does so by rallying around a totem of the leader. For Deadwood, that totem is gold. Those who have it rule those who want it. Agreeing on this single symbol of value has allowed us to organize our individual energies on a wider scale, he has explained. As the place where the last of the great gold strikes occurred, Deadwood seemed the perfect place to show how gold and our accepted value of it could forge a civilization. 19. Though the curse words were anachronistic, cursing was not. Milch was dedicated to getting the tone of the Black Hills right. It was a dangerous and gruff place where men toiled, fought, and cursed. But the curse words of the 1870s would seem downright laughable today, even with a glowering Ian McShane delivering them. So tarnation and Goldar were swapped out for contemporary cursing's heavy hitters, even though the F-word didn't come into popularity until the 1920s. 20. A lot of F-bombs were dropped, but not as many per minute as The Wolf of Wall Street had. Along with being praised for being an impeccably written show with outstanding performances, Deadwood earned attention for its aggressive use of the F-word. According to one dedicated viewer, the entire series clocked in with 2,980 uses of the word. While that beats out Martin Scorsese's curse-laden white-collar crime drama's 569 uses, The Wolf of Wall Street wins when you break it down by uses per minute, boasting 3.16 to Deadwood's 1.56. 21. Timothy Olyphant's mom is not a fan. When her son was first cast as Deadwood's reluctant sheriff Seth Bullock, Mrs. Oliphant was thrilled her boy would be in a western. Then she saw the first episode and was turned off by Milch's approach with its violence and coarse language. I told all the ladies at church you were finally gonna be in something they could watch, she told Oliphant, and now I've got to call them all back. 22. W. Earl Brown found his inspiration for Dan Dority close to home. Deadwood's Dan Dority is Swearengen's right-hand man in many respects. The same was true in real life, where both Dority and Johnny Burns worked as general manager and floor manager of Swearengen's saloon. But in his portrayal of Dan, Brown found inspiration in his uncle. He doesn't like to hear it, Brown confessed, but I tell him, I get up to there and I pretend I'm you. As a tough Kentuckian with a past of, his uncle proved a great starting point for the character. From there, Brown considers Dan an animal walking upright until he met Swearingen, who gave him a path and a home in Deadwood. 23. A Bella Union babe sinks into the tub in the opening credits. Though we never saw her face, Badass Digest recently uncovered the identity of this beautiful bather. Beethoven Staples was one of 20 actresses cast as background extras to play the prostitutes of the Gem and the Bella Union. Staples was selected for CY's Bella Union. But after production wrapped on one, she was called back for some second unit shoots for the opening credits. I had no idea that I was going to be getting into a bathtub until just before we set up the shot, she said. It was as no frills as it gets. They literally set a garden hose out in the sun to get warm so that the water wouldn't be cold when I got into the tub in a barn. We shot the scene in a hurry because we were losing the natural light that was shining through the window. My directions were probably the easiest I've ever received. Simply, sink into the tub as slowly as you can while still making it look natural. A few takes and that was it. When the series debuted, I was astonished by how gorgeous it looked. 24. Milch rejected HBOS offer for a fourth season. Deadwood fans reeled when news of the show's cancellation came just ahead of its premiere in the spring of 2006. Common speculation has laid the blame at the feet of Milch's then greenlit John from Cincinnati. However, Milch himself admitted HBO offered a 6-episode order for 4. But he turned it down, saying, "For my part, I did not want to accept a short order. We couldn't have done the work the way we wanted. I didn't want to limp home. My old man used to say, never go any place where you're only tolerated." 25. Deadwood will rise again, finally. In the nearly 12 years since its finale aired, there have been various rumors of movie specials that would tie up the loose threads left behind by 3. But hope for a long-awaited and craved finale dwindled to dust as time passed, especially in 2009, when McShane told The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, "No hope. That's dead." Milch confirmed this sad news himself in 2012, admitting, "We got really close about a year ago. Never say never, but it doesn't look the way." But in early 2017, reports began to surface that Milch was working on a script for a Deadwood movie. In April of that year, a number of outlets began reporting that Milch had finished the script and turned it into HBO. McShane, too, confirmed the news, telling TV Line that a 2-hour movie script has been delivered to HBO. If they don't deliver a finished product, blame them. Just this morning, at TCA, HBO confirmed that the movie is indeed a go.